When modern life becomes completely exhausting, the urge to disappear for a few days feels almost instinctual. An island seems like the perfect off-grid sanctuary, a piece of land physically detached from the noise of the mainland. We instinctively view the surrounding water as a protective barrier. We treat it like a moat that keeps the chaos of the outside world at a safe distance. But there is a hidden compromise built into this geography. To achieve total isolation, you must sever your physical connection to immediate help. The moment the last ferry leaves, the island becomes a closed logistical system. You are surrounded by a hard, absolute boundary. If a threat emerges inside that boundary, the water stops being a shield. It becomes an inescapable prison wall. A 22-year-old trying to outrun a colorful past found exactly this kind of isolation off the coast of Maine. He booked a suspiciously cheap, standalone cottage entirely surrounded by thick brush, with the ocean right at the front door. During the day, the island relied on a standard maritime infrastructure. The harbor was filled with working lobster boats, and tourists moved back and forth. But by sunset, the day trippers filtered back to the mainland. The public logistics network shut down. That night, the isolation was violated. The renter woke to the sound of heavy boots slowly crunching on the gravel outside. The footsteps paused every time he shifted in bed, eventually stopping right at the front door. Someone tested the handle, banged hard on the wood, and then spoke a single sentence. "I know you're in there, Leo." The stopper eventually gave up, and the renter heard a small outboard motor pull away in the dark. The next morning, heavy boot prints laid out the entire sequence of events. They circled the cottage, then led in a straight line away from the cabin, ending directly at the waterline. Whoever this was, they bypassed the island's fixed public route. They didn't take the ferry. They arrived by independent water transport, targeting a specific cottage on a specific night. When a location is geographically severed from the mainland, public safety relies entirely on bottlenecked transit. A predator with a private boat nullifies that bottleneck, turning a horizontal expanse of water into a trap they alone control. This trap changes shape when applied to vertical architecture. Hashima Island, off the coast of Nagasaki, looks like a concrete battleship. It is a massive, decaying labyrinth of stacked apartment blocks. At its peak, it was a thriving coal mining operation and one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Today, it is an abandoned UNESCO site where tourists are strictly confined to a single narrow path along the seawall due to extreme structural collapse. An American structural engineer secured an exclusive research permit to enter the forbidden buildings. His government-appointed escort, Takeshi, enforced severe rules: wear steel-toed boots, stay on designated paths, and never leave Takeshi's visual range. Inside a crumbling residential block, the engineer noticed physical anomalies. A clear path had been disturbed through decades of dust. A room at the end of the hall carried a bizarre, unnatural smell. And when he touched the concrete wall, it was radiating heat, despite there being no gaps for sunlight. Higher up in the complex, the proof became undeniable. Tucked into a corner room was a pile of fresh blankets and empty water bottles. Someone was living inside the dead city. The engineer turned to show Takeshi, but his guide had vanished. Panicking, the engineer ran back to the stairwell, only to find the steps completely blocked by a freshly piled mound of concrete rubble. From the corridors behind him, multiple sets of heavy footsteps began moving toward his position. This is vertical isolation. Intruders enter a towering maze, assuming it's empty, while hidden inhabitants weaponize the decay, purposefully blocking exits and turning the architecture itself into a physical bottleneck against escape. The cruelest variation of this trap requires no vast ocean at all. North Brother Island is an overgrown, defunct quarantine hospital sitting right in the East River of New York City. 3 college students illegally kayaked to the ruins at 2 a.m. Geographically, they were mere hundreds of yards from the dense urban grid of the Bronx, but logistically, they were entirely beyond the reach of help. While exploring a massive hospital wing, the narrator split from his 2 friends, Jansen and Jesse, to avoid participating in a graffiti tagging. He walked down a pitch-black, branching corridor alone. From a dark room ahead, a voice called his name. It sounded exactly like Jesse. The narrator followed the voice into the room, swept his flashlight, and illuminated a figure standing well over 6.5 feet tall, facing the wall. It wasn't Jesse. Jesse was in a completely different part of the building. The stalker used perfect vocal mimicry to draw the narrator deeper into the maze. They understood that the physical isolation of the ruins meant a victim had no neighbors to alert and nowhere safe to run. Proximity isolation exploits our psychological safety buffers. Seeing the bright lights of a city directly across the water provides a false sense of security, masking the grim reality that without a boat, the narrow river might as well be 1,000 miles wide. Years later, the survivors of these trips remain deeply unsettled. They were targeted, named, and hunted in locations they were completely certain were empty. The Hashima engineer managed to escape the residential block and flee to the boat, where Takeshi waited with complete indifference. But back in the United States, the engineer's primary contact, the esteemed Dr. Yamamoto who arranged the visit, had vanished, entirely unresponsive to any communication. When we venture into extreme, abandoned isolation, we carry an arrogant assumption. We believe that because society left, the space is empty, and we are the apex predators walking into an uninhabited domain. The reality is much darker. When infrastructure rots and public logistics collapse, these spaces default to the sovereignty of whoever is willing to stay in the dark. They operate by rules the casual visitor cannot anticipate. Islands disconnected from the grid are not sanctuaries. They are closed geographical traps. The moment you step ashore, you surrender your safety